The valley had no name on any map that mattered, just grid coordinates and a red circle that meant one thing: American blood on foreign soil. The SEAL team had gone quiet 3 hours ago, their last transmission a burst of static and gunfire that cut through every frequency like a scream. Command had sent 2 F-16s already. Both pilots reported the same thing: too much ground fire, too many targets, impossible approach angles. They'd burned their ordnance on the ridgelines and climbed back to safety, while the SEALs bled out somewhere in the rocks below. The operations center at Bagram had gone quiet in that specific way that meant someone important was making a decision nobody wanted to make. Then a voice came through on the emergency frequency. Female. Calm. The kind of calm that made the hair on your neck stand up because you knew it meant someone had already made peace with what came next. Bagram Actual, this is Iron Talon. I'm 40 miles out with a full combat load. Request clearance for close air support, grid November Victor 7324. The operations officer stared at his screen. Iron Talon, A-10 Warthog, single ship. He pulled up the manifest and felt something cold settle in his chest. Captain Vera Kovic, 32 years old, 300 combat hours over Helmand Province, 2 distinguished flying crosses, and a reputation that made field commanders ask for anyone else. Not because she wasn't good, because she was too good in ways that made men uncomfortable. She flew like someone who had nothing left to lose and everything left to prove. The kind of pilot who took missions other people called suicide runs and came back with empty pylons and footage that made grown men go quiet. Iron Talon, Bagram Actual. Be advised, previous attempts have encountered heavy anti-aircraft fire from multiple positions. We've got SA-7s confirmed, possible ZU-23 placements on the northern ridge. Risk assessment is extreme. There was a pause, not hesitation. Just the space where someone who knew exactly what they were doing let the people who didn't know catch up. Bagram Iron Talon. I didn't ask for a risk assessment. I asked for clearance. The operations officer looked at his commander. The commander looked at the red circle on the map where 6 SEALs were dying. He picked up his headset. Iron Talon, you are cleared hot. God be with you. He usually is, Vera said, and banked her A-10 toward the valley where the sky went to kill people. The mountains rose like broken teeth against a sky the color of old bruises. Vera kept her Warthog low, hugging the deck at 300 feet, engines screaming that distinctive turbofan howl that made Taliban fighters look up in existential dread. The A-10 wasn't beautiful. It was a flying gun with an airplane built around it, all titanium bathtub cockpit and ungainly lines that belonged in a museum, not modern combat. But in the business of keeping people alive when everything had gone to hell, there was nothing better. She'd named it Iron Talon after her grandfather's battalion insignia. He died in Khe Sanh. She'd grown up on stories of last stands and impossible odds. The terrain here was lunar, all sharp ridges and deep wadis where shadows pooled like spilled ink. Her heads-up display painted green diamonds over suspected enemy positions, 17 of them. Her radar warning receiver chirped constantly, tracking search radars that were trying to get a lock. Someone down there had shoulder-fired missiles and the training to use them. They were waiting for her to commit, waiting for her to get low and slow enough that physics became their ally. Bagram, Iron Talon. I'm at the mouth of the valley, no visual on friendlies yet, beginning my approach. She armed her weapons systems, 2 Mavericks under the wings, 11 rockets in the pods, and the GAU-8 Avenger cannon that could turn a tank into Swiss cheese in 3 seconds. 19,000 pounds of ammunition that made the whole aircraft vibrate when it fired. Her headset crackled. Not Bagram, the emergency frequency. Any aircraft. This is Red Wing 26. We're taking fire from 3 sides. 5 KIA, need immediate. The transmission dissolved into static and the unmistakable crack of AK fire. Vera's jaw tightened. Red Wing 26, SEAL Team 6, the best America had, and they were about to become a statistic unless she did something that would probably kill her. She pushed the stick forward. The valley swallowed her whole. The anti-aircraft fire started exactly when she knew it would. green tracers rising from both ridgelines like malevolent fireflies, creating a curtain of death she had to fly through to reach the seals. Her training took over. She jinked right, then hard left, keeping her movements unpredictable while her eyes scanned for the source points. There. Muzzle flashes at 10 o'clock, ridgeline, multiple positions. She thumbed the weapon selector to rockets and squeezed the trigger. The pods rippled fire. 7 rockets streaked out and turned the ridgeline into a temporary sunrise. Secondary explosions bloomed orange and black, ammunition cooking off, but the tracers kept coming. Redwing 2-6 Iron Talon, I'm in the valley, give me your position, static. Then a voice that sounded like it had been dragged through gravel and broken glass. Iron Talon, we're in the wadi, 300 meters north of the burned village. We've got wounded, can't move. They're massing for final assault. Vera spotted the wadi, a dry riverbed cutting through the valley floor like a scar. And surrounding it, at least 40 hostiles moving into position with the coordination of people who knew what they were doing. Not farmers with rifles, trained fighters. She armed a maverick and designated the largest concentration. The missile dropped, ignited, and turned 6 men into a memory, but 40 became 34. Still too many. Her radar warning receiver screamed. Missile lock. SA-7, someone had her. She punched flares and broke hard right, the G-forces trying to push her consciousness down into her boots. The missile went stupid, chasing burning magnesium instead of jet exhaust. But now she was off angle, away from the SEALs, and the enemy fighters were moving in. She could hear them on the SEAL frequency, shouting in Pashto, getting closer. Vera made a decision that would haunt every after-action review. She brought the A-10 around in a turn so tight it should have ripped the wings off, pointed the nose at the wadi, and dove straight down through the stream of anti-aircraft fire with her finger on the trigger of the GAU-8. The cannon fired. The universe ended in sound and violence. 65 rounds per second, depleted uranium penetrators moving at 3,000 feet per second. The sound wasn't a sound. It was a physical thing that broke windows in villages 10 miles away. The recoil slowed her airspeed by 10 knots. The enemy fighters in the wadi ceased to exist in any meaningful sense. She pulled up at 200 feet, so low she could see the expressions on the faces of the men who were trying to kill her. Surprise, fear. The understanding that they'd brought guns to a fight with a flying apocalypse. Redwing, Iron Talon, path is clear south, move now. She climbed and turned, putting herself between the SEALs and the remaining enemy positions, making herself the target, drawing fire away from the men on the ground who couldn't fight back anymore. Tracers reached for her like angry fingers. Her aircraft shuddered as rounds punched through the vertical stabilizer. The A-10 could take damage that would down any other aircraft, but she was starting to accumulate hits that mattered. Engine 2 was running hot, hydraulics pressure dropping in the secondary system. Iron Talon, Redwing, we're moving, got 4 ambulatory, 2 litter, need 30 seconds, an eternity when people were shooting at you. Vera triggered her remaining rockets and walked them across the northern ridgeline, buying time with high explosives and fury. Her jaw ached. She was clenching her teeth hard enough to crack molars. This was the part where something usually went wrong, where physics and mathematics and enemy competence intersected to create the conditions for tragedy. The SA-7 came from her 6 o'clock blind spot. She never saw it launch. Just the missile warning screaming in her headset and the brief understanding that she'd run out of luck in a valley with no name. She punched her last flares and cranked the stick, but the missile was already too close, its seeker head locked on exhaust heat that no countermeasure could hide. It hit her left engine. The explosion was enormous. Metal and fire and the sudden violent understanding that her aircraft was dying. Engine 1 flamed out immediately. Fragments from the explosion had shredded the hydraulics and severed the flight control cables on the left side. The A-10 started to roll inverted, and Vera fought it with every ounce of strength in her arms and back. The ground was coming up fast. She was at 1,500 feet and falling. The ejection seat was right there. Pull the handle. Let the rocket motor carry you away from the dying machine. Standard procedure, by the book. But the SEALs were still in the wadi, still exposed, still vulnerable. If she punched out now, the A-10 would auger in and they'd be alone again with an enemy that was already moving to finish what they'd started. Her hands moved without conscious thought. She killed the fire suppression system to the dead engine, adjusted the trim to compensate for the missing thrust, fought the aircraft level through pure stubborn will and a decade of experience that had taught her how to fly something that didn't want to be flown anymore. The altimeter unwound. 1,000 feet, 800, 500. Red Wing Iron Talon status. The SEAL team leader's voice came back, and it carried something Vera hadn't heard from him before, something that might have been awe. We're clear of the wadi, heading to Exfil Point. Iron Talon, your aircraft is on fire. She looked at the instruments she had left. Half of them were dark. The other half were telling her things she didn't want to know. Engine temperature critical, fuel leak confirmed, multiple hydraulic failures. The stick felt like it was moving through concrete. Red Wing, how far to Exfil? 400 meters, 2 minutes if we push it, 2 minutes. She could stay airborne for 2 minutes, maybe, probably not, but maybe. Iron Talon is staying on station, move. She brought the crippled warthog around in a gentle turn that was all her dying aircraft could manage. Put herself over the SEALs one more time. The enemy fighters had regrouped on the ridgeline. They could see her smoking engine. They knew what it meant. They started moving down toward the valley floor, toward the SEALs, betting that the American pilot would choose her own life over theirs. They'd bet wrong. Vera lined up on the largest group of fighters and triggered the GAU-8 again. The cannon fired. The recoil made her wounded aircraft shudder like a dying animal, but the enemy positions evaporated in a storm of depleted uranium and righteous anger. She held the trigger down until the ammunition counter hit 0, then released and watched the barrel assembly spin down into silence. The A-10 was barely flying now, more falling with style. She'd lost another 1,000 feet. The stick was sluggish. The right wing was dipping no matter what she did. Engine temperature was past critical and climbing. Any second now something essential would fail and the aircraft would make the decision she was refusing to make. Red Wing Iron Talon, talk to me. We're at Exfil. Hello inbound, 30 seconds. 30 seconds, Vera laughed. It sounded bitter even to her own ears. 30 seconds might as well be 30 years. Her left engine chose that moment to explode for the second time. Not a missile this time. Just catastrophic mechanical failure as superheated metal met fuel vapor and made a decision about their future together. The aircraft pitched nose down. The ground filled her canopy. She pulled back on the stick with both hands and nothing happened. Primary flight controls were gone. She was riding a 20-ton glider that wanted very badly to become a crater. Her hand found the ejection handle. She'd done her job. The SEALs were safe. Time to go. But her eyes went to the wadi one last time and she saw them. 6 figures running through the rocks, one of them limping badly, 2 more being half carried by their teammates. And behind them, more fighters emerging from cover, rifles raised, taking aim. They were going to die in the next 5 seconds unless someone did something. Vera released the ejection handle, locked her arms against the stick, and pointed her dying aircraft at the enemy fighters like a missile made of titanium and American stubbornness. The A-10 fell out of the sky at 300 knots. She had no weapons, no engines, no control. Just momentum and gravity and the absolute certainty that these particular enemies were not going to kill these particular Americans. Not today. The fighters saw her coming, started to scatter. Too late. 11 tons of aircraft traveling at terminal velocity doesn't care about your survival instincts. The A-10 hit the ridgeline where the fighters had been gathering and removed that part of the mountain from existence. The impact was biblical. Rock and metal and fire creating a shockwave that knocked the running SEALs off their feet and silenced every weapon in the valley. Then silence. The kind that follows violence. The kind where dust settles and ears ring and survivors try to process what just happened. The SEAL team leader keyed his radio with shaking hands. Iron Talon, Red Wing, status check. Nothing, just static and the crackle of fire from where the mountain used to be. He tried again. Iron Talon, if you can hear this, exfil bird is landing. We're all aboard, all alive because of you, the static continued. Then so faint it might have been imagination, a voice. Redwing, tell them, the sky doesn't forgive, but it remembers. The transmission ended. The rescue helicopter climbed away from the valley with 6 living SEALs who should have been dead. And on the ridge where an A-10 had chosen to become something other than an aircraft, smoke rose into a sky the color of old bruises while the radio played nothing but silence and ghosts. 3 days later, at Bagram Air Base, the operations officer who'd cleared Vera for the mission stood in front of a room full of pilots and commanders and tried to explain what had happened in that unnamed valley. His hands shook when he pulled up the satellite footage. It showed everything. The dive through the anti-aircraft fire, the gun runs that had saved the SEALs, the missile hit and the impossible flying that followed. And finally, the moment when Captain Vera Kovic had chosen 6 lives over her own and pointed her aircraft at the enemy like a sword. The room was silent when the footage ended. Then someone in the back started clapping, slowly at first. Then others joined. Then everyone. The operations officer let it continue for a moment before raising his hand. There's more. He pulled up a different image, taken by a Predator drone 3 hours after the crash. It showed the impact site. And sitting in the rocks 50 meters away, covered in blood and dirt and wrapped in a torn parachute, a figure, still alive. The room erupted. The operations officer waited for silence. Captain Kovic ejected at the last possible second, sustained 2 fractured vertebrae, a shattered collarbone, and severe burns on her left side. She was extracted by a second rescue mission after she used her survival radio to call in her own position. He paused. She's currently in Germany receiving treatment. The doctors say she'll never fly again. The room went quiet again. Different this time. Grief instead of triumph. However, the operations officer continued, before she went into surgery, Captain Kovic submitted a request. She wants to know if anyone recovered the GAU-8 from the wreckage. Says it has sentimental value. Someone laughed. Then everyone laughed. The kind of laughter that comes from people who live with death and recognize audacity when they see it. The operations officer smiled. The gun was recovered intact. Command is having it mounted in the squadron-ready room with a plaque. The SEAL team has requested permission to attend the dedication ceremony. He looked around the room at faces that had started this briefing with the casual cynicism of people who'd seen everything and been impressed by nothing. Those faces were different now. Gentlemen, we've all heard stories about what the A-10 can do, what it was designed for, but until 3 days ago, I don't think any of us truly understood what it means when someone decides that mission completion matters more than survival. He pulled up one final image, Vera's official photo. Young, serious, eyes that had seen things and decided to see more anyway. Captain Vera Kovic, call sign Iron Talon, silver star with V device approved. Purple Heart approved, and a permanent place in the history of close air support. The operations officer closed his briefing folder. Dismissed. 6 months later at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, Vera sat in a wheelchair and watched technicians mount the GAU-8 from her aircraft on a reinforced wall in the squadron-ready room. The barrel was scorched and bent. The housing was pitted with shrapnel scars. It looked like something that had fought a war and refused to surrender. Her commanding officer stood beside her. Colonel Marcus Webb, 52 years old, 300 combat missions over Iraq. He'd written her fitness reports for 3 years and spent most of that time trying to figure out what made her tick. Hell of a thing, he said, nodding at the gun. Hell of a mission. Vera didn't answer immediately. She was watching the plaque being mounted below the weapon. It read, GAU-8 Avenger, recovered from A-10C Iron Talon, November 2024, Valley of No Return. 6 American lives saved, 0 American lives lost. The sky doesn't forgive, but it remembers. She'd chosen that phrase herself, though she couldn't remember speaking it into her radio in those final moments. The drugs had been strong, the pain stronger, but the SEALs swore she'd said it, so it must be true. They're calling it the Valley of No Return now, Webb said. The valley where you crashed. Intelligence says the Taliban won't go near it. Think it's cursed. Vera smiled, though it hurt her still healing ribs. It is cursed, cursed with the knowledge that Americans don't quit. Webb studied her face. The burns had healed mostly, leaving scars that made her look harder than her 32 years. The vertebrae fractures had healed too, but the doctors were right. She'd never pass a flight physical again. Not for fast jets, not for anything that pulled serious G-forces. Her flying career was over before she'd hit her prime. "What are you going to do?" Webb asked. Vera gestured at the gun on the wall. "I'm going to make sure every pilot who walks through this ready room understands what that thing represents. Not just firepower, not just close air support, but the promise we make when we strap into those aircraft." She looked at him. "That Americans take care of their own, no matter what." Webb nodded slowly. "They want you to teach at the weapons school, share your experience with the next generation." Vera considered this, teaching, sharing knowledge instead of creating it. It felt like surrender. But when she looked at that scarred barrel, she understood something she hadn't before. Survival wasn't the mission. The mission was the mission. Survival was just what you did afterward so you could explain to everyone else how it was done. "I'll do it," she said, "on one condition." Webb raised an eyebrow. "Name it." "I want to write the curriculum for close air support in high-threat environments. No more sending people into valleys like that without proper understanding of what they're facing." Webb extended his hand. "Done." They shook. Vera's grip was still strong despite everything her body had been through. Some things trauma couldn't touch. The dedication ceremony happened 3 weeks later. The squadron ready room was packed with pilots, ground crew, and a delegation of SEALs who'd flown in from Virginia specifically for this event. Red Wing 26, the team leader from that day in the valley, stood at the front. His real name was Commander James Lattimore, 40 years old, 20 years in the teams. He'd seen things that would break normal men and stayed functional through compartmentalization and dark humor. But when he looked at Vera sitting in her wheelchair, something in his expression cracked and showed the human underneath. "We don't do speeches in the teams," he said, his voice carrying to the back of the room. "We do results, but today I'm going to make an exception." He gestured at the mounted gun. 6 months ago, my team was compromised in terrain that gave every advantage to the enemy. We'd lost 5 men, had 2 more who wouldn't make it another hour. Command had written us off. Sent fast movers who couldn't get close enough to matter. We were accepting that we'd die in that valley. He paused. Then we heard an A-10, single ship, flying like someone who'd made a promise to God and intended to keep it. Lattimore looked directly at Vera. Captain Kovich didn't just provide close air support that day. She became close air support, turned herself into a weapon, put her aircraft between us and every threat until there was nothing left of her bird but scrap metal and determination. He pulled something from his pocket, a tactical patch, black background. Silver Talon gripping a red lightning bolt. "The teams don't make patches for every mission, but we made one for this. Iron Talon. The pilot who taught us that the Air Force still remembers what support means." He crossed to Vera and placed the patch in her hands. She stared at it. Her throat was tight. "Commander, you don't have to say anything," Lattimore interrupted. "You said it all when you pointed your aircraft at that ridgeline and proved that some debts can only be paid with action." He snapped to attention and saluted. The entire SEAL team followed suit. Then the Air Force personnel in the room. Then everyone. Vera sat in her wheelchair surrounded by the respect of people who understood what it meant to put mission above self. And for the first time since the crash, she cried. The ceremony ended with a flyover. 4 A-10s from the squadron, one peeling off in the missing man formation. The sound of those turbofans echoed across Ramstein, and every pilot on the flight line stopped what they were doing to watch. When the aircraft disappeared into the clouds, Vera was still holding the patch, still processing the idea that her worst day had become her defining day. That failure to survive had become a masterclass in how to fight. Colonel Webb found her afterward, alone in the ready room, staring at the gun on the wall. "Penny for your thoughts," he said. Vera didn't look away from the weapon. "I keep thinking about what I could have done differently, how I could have saved the aircraft and still completed the mission." Webb shook his head. That's the wrong question. The right question is whether you'd make the same choice again knowing how it turned out. Vera was quiet for a long moment. Yes, every time, Webb smiled. That's why you're going to be a hell of an instructor, because you understand that the mission isn't about the hardware, it's about the people we're trying to bring home. He pulled out a folder. Speaking of which, I have your first class assignment. 24 new A-10 pilots fresh out of training. They need someone to teach them what it really means to fly close air support. Vera took the folder, opened it, looked at the names and faces of pilots who didn't know yet what they'd be asked to give. When do we start? Monday, 0700. Welcome to the weapons school, Captain Kovich. She nodded. Iron Talon, she corrected quietly. Call me Iron Talon. The first class met on a Monday morning when the German sky was the color of old bruises and rain threatened but never fell. 24 pilots filed into the classroom expecting PowerPoint presentations and standardized curriculum. What they got was Vera in her wheelchair, positioned in front of the mounted GAU-8, with satellite footage queued up on the screen behind her. She didn't introduce herself, didn't waste time with credentials or background. Just hit play on the footage and let them watch what happened when theory met reality in a valley with no name. The room was silent as the video played. You could hear the A-10's gun firing through the audio feed, could see the tracers reaching up from both ridgelines, could watch the moment when the missile hit and the aircraft started dying. When it was over, Vera paused the footage on a frame showing her warthog inverted and trailing smoke. "How many of you think I made the right decision?" she asked. About half the hands went up. She nodded. Wrong question. The right question is whether I made the only decision, whether I had any choice at all once I accepted the mission. She advanced the footage to show the SEALs running through the wadi, enemies converging, her aircraft falling from the sky like an angry meteor. In this business, you're going to face moments where all your options are bad, where the by-the-book answer gets people killed and the creative answer gets you killed. Your job is to understand the difference between acceptable loss and unacceptable failure. A hand went up. Young lieutenant, probably 24 years old. Freshly minted wings and confidence that hadn't been beaten out of him yet. "Ma'am, couldn't you have ejected earlier? Saved the aircraft for another mission." Vera smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. "Lieutenant, what's your name?" "Castillo, ma'am." "Lieutenant Castillo, that aircraft was already dead. Engine gone, hydraulics failing. Flight controls severed. I could have ejected at 2,000 feet and lived, but the SEALs would have died. So the question isn't whether I could have saved the aircraft. It's whether 6 American lives are worth one aircraft and one pilot willing to risk everything to protect them. She rolled her wheelchair closer to the class. Here's what they don't teach you in flight school. The A-10 wasn't designed to be survivable because it's built tough. It was designed to be survivable because the mission requires you to get close enough to the enemy that they can hurt you. And when you accept that mission, you're accepting that you might not come home, but the people you're protecting will. That's the job. The class was paying attention now, really paying attention. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was a woman who turned theory into scars and was standing in front of them, daring them to understand the difference. Over the next 6 months, I'm going to teach you how to fly close air support in environments where everything wants you dead. I'm going to teach you threat assessment and weapons employment and tactics that will keep you alive. But first, I need you to understand why we do this." She gestured at the gun on the wall. That weapon fired its last rounds defending people who couldn't defend themselves. It did exactly what it was designed to do, right up until the moment it became part of the wreckage. You are not that different from that gun. You are a weapons system, a highly trained, expensive, complicated weapons system. And when Americans are dying, you are the answer to their prayers. Never forget that. Never forget that someone's son or daughter or parent is alive today because you were willing to get low and slow and close enough to make a difference. The rain started falling outside, gentle at first, then harder. It sounded like static on the windows. Vera looked at the young faces in front of her and saw herself 6 months ago, confident, competent, unbroken. She wondered how many of them would still have that look in a year. How many would end up in wheelchairs or worse, sharing their scars with the next generation. "Welcome to weapons school," she said. "If you make it through my class, you'll understand what it means to fly the Warthog. If you don't, you'll wash out and fly something safer. Either way, you'll know the truth about close air support, that it's not about the aircraft. It's about the promise we make to the people on the ground who trust us to be there when everything goes to hell." She dismissed them. They filed out quietly, already different from when they'd entered. Already starting to understand the weight of what they'd volunteered for, Lieutenant Castillo lingered. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" Vera nodded. "Did you know you were going to crash when you stayed in the valley?" Vera thought about this. About the moment when her hand found the ejection handle and released it. About choosing 6 lives over 1. "No," she said honestly. "I knew I was going to stay. The crash was just what happened after." The training program Vera designed was brutal. 6 months of classroom instruction, simulator time, and eventually live-fire exercises that pushed the students to their limits and occasionally beyond. She taught them how to read terrain for threat vectors, how to communicate with ground forces when the radio was full of screaming and gunfire, how to make split-second decisions about weapons employment when every second meant lives. But more than tactics, she taught them mindset. The understanding that close air support wasn't a mission profile. It was a covenant, a promise written in jet fuel and depleted uranium that said, "We do not abandon our own." The students struggled. Some washed out, couldn't handle the stress or the expectations or the weight of knowing that people would die if they failed. But the ones who stayed got harder, sharper, started carrying themselves with the quiet confidence of people who'd looked at worst-case scenarios and developed plans for them. 6 months into her tenure at the weapons school, Vera received a visitor, Commander Lattimore, the SEAL team leader from the Valley. He found her in her office, surrounded by lesson plans and after-action reports, still working at 2,200 hours because sleep didn't come easy anymore. "Commander," she said, surprised, "didn't expect to see you in Germany." Lattimore settled into a chair across from her desk. He looked tired, older than his 40 years. "Had some business at Ramstein. Thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing." Vera gestured at the paperwork. "Living the dream, teaching people how not to die." Lattimore smiled. "Heard you're terrifying the students, making them earn it." "They should be terrified. This job kills people who aren't ready for it." She paused. "How's the team?" "Good, healed up, back in rotation." He met her eyes. "We talk about you sometimes, about that day. The guys wanted me to tell you something." Vera waited. Lattimore leaned forward. "We've worked with a lot of air support over the years. Fast movers, helicopters, drones, all of them good, professional, but what you did was different. You didn't just support us. You became one of us, made our fight your fight. That's rare, that's special." He pulled out another tactical patch. Same design as before, but different colors. Red background, gold Talon. "The teams are adopting Iron Talon as an honorary call sign for any A-10 pilot who goes above and beyond. Thought you should know." Vera took the patch, felt the weight of it, not the physical weight, the other kind, the weight of legacy and expectation and the understanding that what she'd done in that valley had become bigger than one mission or one pilot. "Commander, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just keep teaching these kids how to do it right. Because the next time we're in a valley with no name and everything's going to hell, we need to know that somewhere up there is a pilot who understands the promise." They talked until midnight, about the mission, about the valley, about